Photographs there of someone who's achieved so much and received many honours and awards. Terry Riley. For 50 years you've been involved in campaigning and deaf politics. You worked on the BBC's See Here for 30 years, working your way to the very top, and you've been the chair of the British Deaf Association for 9 years. But at home you have a wife and children. You're very much a family man. So when you look at yourself, how do you see yourself first and foremost?
It's interesting. Everybody thinks I'm this dyed-in-the-wool member of the deaf community, that the BDA is my number one thing. But for me, my family comes first, my children, my wife and my extended family. But I always see the deaf community as a bigger extension of my family.
So what does the deaf community mean to you?
Well, it runs in my blood. I'm deaf. Through and through, always have been, ever since I was taken to the deaf club in my pram at 1 week old. Wherever I go in the world, there are two things I always have to do. Visit the local deaf club, visit a deaf school, or both. I can't go anywhere without doing that. It's always been a natural part of my life.
You were born just before the end of the Second World War in Manchester. Your parents were both deaf, and you have a hearing brother and sister. Your mother was an office cleaner, and your father worked in a clothes factory. Very much a working-class family. What was your upbringing like?
For me, it was a wonderful life because my parents were full of love. My father was a real gentleman, very quiet, always on his best behaviour, not interested in sports or football, never touched a drink, like a teetotaler with their pioneer badges. But he was very religious. He'd been to Boston Spa School. My mum was more assertive. She was involved in committees, taught sign language, generally more outgoing. But both of them, for me, wow, I learned a lot from them. From my dad, patience, and from my mum, assertiveness, not to take any nonsense from people. They had a great relationship, but they were very different. My dad was a sign language user through and through, but my mum had an oral upbringing. When they first met, couldn't understand each other, but love conquers all. They were married for over 60 years.
You said you were immersed in the deaf club from the time you were 1 week old. So does that mean your heart's been in the deaf community ever since?
Well, for me, the word deaf club is interesting. For me, it was home. That was my home. That was where I belonged. I went to the deaf club every week, without fail, all my life. Like some people go to sports clubs. Not me. For me, everything was in the deaf club, 100%, 150%. Plus, it was also our church. I became an altar boy, got involved in the secretarial work, everything. I learned everything from that place. Without the deaf club, I wouldn't be here. No chance. It gave me the strength to do everything I've done. My heart's in the deaf club, and the deaf club is in my heart.
You had a hearing brother and sister, but when you were a bit older, your parents took in a deaf boy, Jerry Hanifin. Was there a difference in how you got on with him and your other siblings?
It's interesting. My parents, at that time, I think there were just two of us, me and my brother Kevin. And at the time, most deaf schools were boarding schools. The kids stayed there, only got home at Christmas, once a year. Well, there was a deaf priest called Canon Hayward, and he'd heard about this deaf boy who didn't have any parents to go home to, had to stay at an orphanage. He was on his own, just this one single deaf boy in this orphanage at Christmas. So he asked my parents if he could stay with us. So my parents took him in, and that carried on for years and years, till I think Jerry left when he was about 18 or 19. And all that time, he was like a brother to me. We're still really close, even to this day. 50 years on, and we're still very close.
So you were very close to Jerry. Did you feel you had a closer bond with him than with your hearing brother and sister?
Maybe because my hearing brother was younger than me. When he finished school, he came to work with me. I'm a hard taskmaster, so I made him work. And how? My standards are very high. I won't accept sloppy work. So I was quite hard on him. And in a way, I pushed him towards becoming a butcher and supported him in that. Jerry was more part of the sign language community, and we were kind of rivals as well. At Mass in church, him and me were both altar boys. Can you imagine? Us. We would race to see who could get to the deaf club first. Whoever won got to ring the bell. So it became like a race, and it's been that way ever since. Jerry... I'm not dismissing my brother and sister. I was very close to them, but there was a cultural difference there.
As a child, you were ill quite a lot. You were in hospital a few times, and you had to have some operations. Why was that?
Well, my dad's family have problems with the area just behind their ears. My auntie, my dad's sister, had to have operations for mastoiditis, and one of them left her with a hole behind her right ear. When I was born, at 6 weeks, I had to have my cleft palate repaired, and then they found I had infections in my mastoid bones when I was 6 weeks old. So I was operated on, and gradually I lost my hearing. I had to have the operations again when I was 7. And then once, when my parents told me I'd been put in a home because I caught salmonella from eating an ice cream. Food poisoning. And I was there for 6 months. Mum and Dad didn't have a car at the time, so they had to take the bus to Southport and back to come and see me. Years later, I had a chest problem, and when I was x-rayed, the doctor told me I had a shadow on my lung. Asked me a lot of questions, and I didn't know the answers. He asked if I'd had TB. I said, no, I hadn't, but my mother's brother did. He'd been a prisoner of war with the Japanese. But the doctor said to me, no, I'd had TB when I was small. I was gobsmacked. My parents never knew. So I was about 60 when I found out I'd had TB as a child, but we'd had no information.
So you'd had all these illnesses. But what about school? What school did you go to? What was your time at school like?
I went to a mainstream school because at that time, remember, Manchester was very oral under the Ewing philosophy. Do I feel I was successful? No, that was partly my own fault because I hated school. I played truant, played the wag for 2 years. I really didn't like school. Then Miss sent me to another school in Manchester. At that time, they had the 11 plus, so I had to sit the exam. But then I found out my school was in the wrong area. I should have been going to school in Trafford. In Manchester, they had a 2-day exam, but in Trafford, everything was done in one Saturday morning. So I'd been getting taught the wrong curriculum for the exam I was sitting. So I failed the 11 plus. At school, what I was good at was sports. I was good at football and hurdles. Education, well, I left at 14. My parents let me leave. And I had no GCSEs, no A-levels, nothing at all. All my experience is from life, not from education. That's it. But it was partly my own fault. So that's why now I campaign so much about the importance of education.
So all this time you're going to the Deaf Club. Then when you were only 15, you became secretary of Manchester Deaf Club and later on president. That was remarkably young to become secretary at such a young age. What do you think you brought to the Deaf Club? And what did you learn? What do you think the Deaf Club gave to you?
The Deaf Club, for me, was a way of accessing language and education. I don't mean education like 4x4 or anything like that. I mean an education in life. On Sundays, after Mass, we'd all go upstairs for tea and toast. Then, after that, the priest, a deaf priest, would sit us all round in a semicircle and read out the news from a paper in sign language. It was like news round. Then he'd pick us out one by one and ask us for our views. So that meant I had to learn what he told me, work out why he told me, judge what I thought was right and wrong, and be able to answer his questions. That's why often now I'll put up my hand before somebody's finished a question because of that training.
But what I'd really like to ask you is, you were only 15, so what made you want to become a secretary? What was it inside you that made you want to do that at 15?
Well, it was all because Canon Hayward died and we had to arrange his funeral. Remember, in those days we'd no cars, so we had to work out how to organise a hired bus, a Manchester bus. The deaf people followed the funeral in the bus. After church, we had to go to the burial in Moston, a long way out. I think only about 2 deaf people had their own cars at that time. So that's what we did. Plus, I had the ability to use English. I could help out with communication, and I think that became part of my responsibilities. Also, me and my dad would go to the Deaf Club every week, and you know those old newsletter printers? You'd type it out and ink it, and you'd get ink all over your fingers, and then you'd crank out the newsletters. Well, I used to help my dad with that, so that became my responsibility. At the time, we didn't see it as a responsibility. We volunteered. We wanted to work. We wanted to support things. We knew there was no money in it. We just did it. I think it's a bit different now.
I'm wondering, you were always active from a very early age, but was there anything else that had a big impact on you, that gave you that determination?
Well, there is one thing. Not many people know about this. I remember my parents' house was just like a deaf club. We always had deaf people coming to visit. Sometimes they'd stay over, sleep on the floor, everywhere. We all trusted each other. That was the word, trust. We trusted each other. Then I'd be about 15, 16, 17, round about then. At that time, I loved trains, train spotting. And one time, a man came up and started to talk to me. We chatted, and he started to give me treats, take me to cafes, things like that. And he started, I didn't realise this at the time, a process of sexual grooming. He started taking me around the country with him, taught me to drive. That was another kind of treat. Remember, my family wasn't rich, and he was giving me all these treats. When we stayed in hotels, if there weren't enough beds, we'd have to share a bed. Then he started to touch me in different places. But at that time, my parents had never told me about the facts of life. Sex was taboo. Later on, I realised one day the police came to the house, knocked at the door, and they told me the man had been arrested. I was shaking. What was going on? They had to get an interpreter. So I told them about how he'd abused me sexually. And it hit me that I'd just accepted this as normal. Didn't make any fuss, just kept it to myself. So now, with the BDA, when it comes to youth work, children's safeguarding, I'm always adamant about these things. The rules must be there and they must be followed because of my own experience. In one way, I can't say I felt traumatised or bitter. I became stronger because of what happened. Never told my parents. My children know, but my parents never knew. So, in a way, we all have a responsibility. Some things can be positive, at other times they can be negative. What's important is how you deal with the negatives. So I feel that wasn't good, but I am who I am because of it.
So you left school, and eventually you got a job as a gas meter reader. Then you became a special inspector. What skills did you have to get that job? Was it difficult? How did you get on with people?
I found this advert for a job. At that time, they'd discovered North Sea oil and they'd started off producing gas. So all across the country, they were changing people's meters. So that's where I started. The old meters used old pennies and these all had to be changed so they could take shillings. So my job was to go to houses and replace their meters, then collect the money from the meters and sort it all out. So I did that for a good while, but I started to get fed up. It was very repetitive. It did keep me slim, all that walking. I was very slim. So when I wanted to finish, they asked me if I'd like to become what was called a special inspector. That meant I was responsible for meters. The law at the time said meters had to be checked every year. If it was overdue, we had to go and check if the meter was working or check if anyone was fiddling with them. A lot of people used to break into their meters and damage them or fiddle the money. So my responsibility was to go around doing that, and I enjoyed it for a while. One time I went into this house to inspect the meter with the police. No, sorry, I had a warrant to break into the house with a joiner, as he was called at the time, to open the door. So I was inspecting the meter when the householder suddenly came up behind and grabbed me, starting to have a go at me, and I just felt helpless. He took out a fag and started smoking, and I realised it was cannabis, and this man was out of it. Then he rammed me up against the wall, got a screwdriver and started stabbing it into the wall all round my head. I was ducking and dodging all over the place, terrifying. After about 3 or 4 hours, I finally managed to escape and get home. When I went into work and told them about it, they just shrugged their shoulders, said it was my problem because I'd signed the contract, and that was that. I was off work for a month, and I handed in my notice.
Going back to that time at the gas board, when you had to cut off people's gas, do you think that means you have a hard side to your character?
Hard? No, but I follow the rules, and I'm tough about that. The rules are the rules. Well, there were some families who were really poor, especially deaf families. A lot of them, when I saw them, I would usually write out on my form and hand that in. I'd tell them to go and see their welfare officer and get it sorted. Then I'd tell the office they were out. So I wasn't that hard. Well, maybe I was hard, but that's just me. I follow the rules, and if they say it's wrong, that's that.
When you were young, in your youth, you used to go dancing a lot. And it was at a dance in a pub that you met your hearing wife, Angela. Tell us about that.
Well, there was this deaf group, about 5 of us, and we'd go regularly to watch people like Bill Haley and Elvis, popular musicians of the time. So we were at the Plaza in Manchester, and at that time they didn't sell alcohol. Just orange juice, tea and coffee. Some of us youngsters wanted a drink, so we went to a pub called Tommy Duck's, just round the corner. Very small pub. It's famous for all the ladies' knickers pinned across the ceiling. A lot of theatre people used to go there. So we were sitting and chatting when in came these 4 girls. 4? Yeah, 4. They came in and stood just behind us. Pub was crowded and I couldn't help noticing them, so I asked one of them if she wanted a seat, and I offered her my lap. So she sat on my lap and carried on talking to her friends and me to my friends. I said, "I'll see you later, back at the dance club." So I met her at the deaf club. No, sorry, at the dancing. So the night went on, and I saw her off on a bus home and then went back inside to carry on dancing. So I met her, got engaged, married for 49 years now, 50 next year.
I wonder, congratulations on your marriage, but I wonder, did you ever have any doubts about marrying a hearing woman? You were deaf with a deaf upbringing. Did you ever have any doubts?
No. I feel sometimes, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, that if I'd married a deaf woman, I'd be divorced by now. Because a deaf wife would never have let me do what I do now. My wife is dedicated to bringing up family. She once said to me, "I'm like a butterfly. You can cage it, but you can't hold it." Because my heart, even before I married her, has always been in the deaf community. She's always known that. That's my everything. I'm proud of my wife. I cherish her. A lot of deaf people don't know her. They've never seen her. She stays quietly at home.
So your wife, Angela, is hearing. You have 4 children. But I know that your own parents fostered someone. Then you two took in a deaf child to foster. What made you decide to do that?
I think, you always follow the example of your parents. My parents set me a good example. They took in Jerry. And also, I knew how Jerry felt because he has a brother and a sister, and they were in a foster home. And Jerry, we discussed it and agreed it had to be a deaf child. It was difficult. There were so many barriers. They said we couldn't. Hearing wife, deaf husband, couldn't do it. At that time, deaf people weren't allowed.
That's right.
Anyway, we fought for 2 years. We kept on and on. Then they told us about a deaf girl just 3 miles down the road in Stockport, so she came to us a few times. Then the same week that Angela had our son, they placed the deaf girl with us. Wow. So the family shot up from 2 to 4 children in a week. It was a big change. She had no language at all, because if you go to a school you can communicate and sign, but in the children's home where nobody could sign, she was completely isolated. She would just go out and play on the swings on her own. We only found this out from her drawings about those memories. There was one time, and this really made me cry, she did a drawing of a cot with a lid on top, with a light bulb hanging in the background. I didn't understand until I found out that when it was night time at the home, to stop her getting out, they put a lid on top of the cot and fastened it down. They couldn't communicate with her, so they just imprisoned her in the cot. So when she came to us, we all went to the deaf club, and as Catholics, we must know the catechism. So we taught her that, and her signing improved. At first she couldn't sign, but she's improved a lot. She's over 40 now, lives independently. I saw her recently, and her signing's just great.
So there you were, going along in the deaf community, working hard in the deaf world. Then in 1986, your life changed completely. You got a new job at the BBC, at See Here. Before that, had you ever had any thoughts and plans that one day you might work at the BBC, in TV? Was it planned?
No way. That was a different level altogether. Deaf people never had that kind of positive thinking. Impossible. Deaf programmes? In my time, there weren't any. I remember when I finished school, I thought, what would I do? I got a job at the local grocers. And one of my jobs was delivering food to Old Trafford Deaf School, Klein House and Talbot House. So there was a connection there. But as for my future, well, my children want to work in the media, or they want this and that. But in my time, I could have worked as a presser like my dad, but I didn't want that. I'm hopeless with my hands. I couldn't be a joiner or a decorator. I could never have earned a living with my hands. I use them to sign, and that's it. So I'm not a manual worker, definitely not. Then when I got into the BDA, that gave me a lot of opportunities to travel around, and people started to know me. They talked about this Terry Riley who was doing good things in the Northwest. So they asked me to go for an interview. At that time, there were 50 applicants. It was the first time they'd advertised. They'd never done it before. But Doug Alker had said, please advertise it next time. So I went for the interview and I made the final shortlist of 3. I won't tell you who the other 2 were, you'll know them. Then it was over and they gave me the job. And wow, that transformed my life. Because remember, I was in Manchester up in the northwest. London was all the way down in the southeast. Also, I've said it before, I worked very hard. I worked 3 times harder than anybody else because I had to prove what I could achieve. All my life, working in a hearing world as a professional, the only deaf person, I always had to prove to people I was there because I was me, not because I was deaf, playing the sympathy card. Things were hard, but we did have a good team. It was incredible. That was the liberation of everything inside me, like a lid suddenly flipping open. Bam! I became their part of the deaf community, and I had to make sure there was other deaf involvement as well. We had a good team at that time. Clive Mason was there, and Maureen Denmark, started at the same time as me. It was mostly a hearing team, then it expanded to include us 3 deaf people. Maggie Woolley had stepped down and Clive replaced her. Then I came in as a researcher. I was never in the office. I went all over the place, bringing back piles of ideas, till my boss said, hang on, we can't do all those, please. But what? I had all these ideas, all these places to visit. In the end, I worked there for nearly 25 years. Wow. It also taught me how to, well, the differences between deaf culture and hearing culture. I'm very deaf in how I do things. I bang the table to get people's attention, and they were shocked. I was very direct in how I'd tell people things. I had to learn management skills, how to approach staff. They were all different. One person might be very confrontational, another was different, so I'd have to change the way I dealt with them. I had to become a hard producer on all different levels. And it was hard, and the hours were long. When you work for the BBC, it's a 24/7 job, because if you're going to meet people at a deaf club, you can't follow 9 to 5. You have to meet people at weekends. So my weekends with a family, I had to say to them, sorry, I'm going somewhere. I think for me, wow, it taught me about finding out who I am and how I deal with people. I am hard. I remember my boss, Bryn Brooks, saying to me, you need to go on an assertiveness course because your staff are all frightened of you. I was very demanding, but I supported them. I might look hard, but one or two interpreters have said to me, you look hard, but actually you're a pussycat.